If you'd like to get stronger, more flexible hips without the hassle of getting down on the floor or lying down to exercise, then this video is for you. I'm Dr. Dave Candy, and in this video, I'll show you 7 exercises that you can do to stretch and strengthen your hips while sitting in a chair. Now, before we get started, not every exercise is going to be for every person. Some people may need more of the flexibility exercises, some people may need more strengthening exercises, some people may need both. So try them and see which ones seem most applicable to you. The other thing is that the strengthening exercises are more suited for people who have trouble getting up from the floor, going upstairs, or squatting. And so if those things are pretty easy for you, the stretching exercises may still be valuable, but the strengthening exercises may be a little too low level. So let's get started. The first exercise is a stretch for your hip flexors. You have multiple muscles that are categorized as hip flexors, which is the motion of lifting your leg up like this. To stretch those muscles, you go into the motion of hip extension, which is going backwards this way. Now, one of your hip flexors, the rectus femoris, is a quadricep muscle that crosses both the hip and crosses the knee. And so the benefit of stretching with your knee bent is it stretches both your iliopsoas, which cross just the hip joint, as well as your rectus femoris, which crosses both the hip and the knee joint. And so one way that people do this is to kneel on the floor doing a stretch like this. But if you have knee pain or just have trouble getting up from the floor, that may not be a version that's great for you. So you can do a similar version sitting in the chair where you sit with half your bottom on the chair like this, the other leg hanging off, and then just stretch forward until you feel a stretch in the front of the hip and or the thigh. And then hold that stretch for about a minute, and then change over, and you can do the opposite side. If you happen to notice that one side feels easier or harder than the other, spend a little more time stretching on the side that's harder so that you get equal muscle balance. Now, when you're in this position, we can move on to the next exercise, which is actually a strengthening exercise. Again, I mentioned these are good for people who have trouble getting up from the floor. And so if you do have trouble getting up from the floor, this is the seated version of a lunge. You start out basically in the bottom position of a lunge as if you were going to get up off the floor, and then you just press through the heel of this leg. So it's an isometric exercise. Now, if you're able to just pop right up to standing, again, this one may be too easy for you. But if you have a little more trouble standing up from a chair, going upstairs, getting up from the floor, this is a good version to help strengthen your glutes and your quadriceps. You can also lean forwards, load your weight out over the leg. And this makes it a little bit more difficult because it lifts your bottom up off the chair. You can see it this way. If you lean forwards a little bit, your bottom actually starts to come up off the chair and you're load bearing a little bit more, versus if you're sitting down, it's a little easier like this when your bottom is all the way on the chair. So that's the second exercise. Now, the third exercise is for your adductor muscles or inner thigh muscles. These muscles often get stiff, especially if you spend a lot of time sitting with your legs crossed. So if you do have stiffness in your inner thigh muscles, one way you can stretch those is just kind of straddling the chair like this, and then kind of leaning forwards like that a little bit. So this pushes the thighs out that way. You should feel kind of a nice stretch in the inner thigh and groin region. And again, hold this for about a minute or so. Now, once you've done this, we can move on to the next strengthening exercise, which is the seated version of a squat or a horse stance. You'll start in that same position where you're straddling the chair here. Turn your knees out. This helps strengthen your gluteal muscles as well as your hip external rotators, meaning turning the hips outwards. So drive the knees out to the side like that. Now, you may also feel a stretch in the groin here when doing this. So it's good to start out with that stretch first, to get things stretched out in here, then turn the hips outwards, then drive through your heels as if you're going to stand up from the chair. Again, if you can just pop right up like that, this one's probably too easy for you, but lean forwards, get your weight through your heels, and then it's just an isometric version where you're driving your heels down into the floor while driving your knees outward. Now, if that is too easy for you, you can come partially up off the chair, just like the previous strengthening exercise, where you're putting a little bit more weight into it. And if that's too easy yet, you can just do more of a regular horse stance where you're in that same position without the chair. Now, the next exercise is a stretch for your piriformis muscle. That's a muscle that's commonly implicated with sciatica. It runs over top of your sciatic nerve, or in some people, your sciatic nerve actually pierces through that muscle. Now, it's one of 6 hip external rotators, which again is that motion of turning the leg out that way. The funny thing is, though, that we're actually going to stretch the external rotator by going into external rotation. And the reason for that is when your leg is up higher than 90 degrees, the piriformis actually becomes an internal rotator. So we're going to stretch an external rotator by going into external rotation. Sounds funny, but it actually works. So what you should feel here as you're pushing down, just give a gentle push. You may feel this in the back of the hip. You may also feel it in the inner thigh. You may feel it in both. But just go to the point where you feel comfortable. And again, hold that stretch for about a minute and then do it on the other leg. Now, it is very, very, very common for people to have asymmetries where one side feels like it goes farther than the other one. And so stretch the one that feels like it's a little bit more stiff for a longer period of time. The next exercise is another stretch for your glute muscles and hip external rotators. And this one is pulling the knee towards the opposite shoulder. Now hold that position for a stretch. You may notice that this is easier on one versus this. So typically do the one that feels more difficult, whether it's going into external rotation or whether it's going across the body like that. And again, hold it for about a minute. Now the final exercise is a strengthening exercise for your hip flexor muscles, and particularly the iliopsoas, the one that just crosses your hips. That actually attaches to your spine, and so it allows you to flex your hip up greater than 90 degrees. So pick your leg up using your hands, bring it up as high as you possibly can while keeping your spine straight, and then try to hold it there. If you can't hold that maximum position, just give a little bit of extra help with your hands to be able to keep it up as high as you possibly can. This is good for people who have difficulty lifting their leg to get in and out of a car or lifting their leg to get in bed at night. So try this exercise where you lift up using your hands, bring it up into as much hip flexion as you have possible, and then let go using your hands only as much as needed to keep it in the highest position. So those were 7 exercises to help stretch and strengthen your hips while you're sitting down. Now, if you need some further strengthening exercises for your hips, check out this video over here. But before you go check that one out, if you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to our channel so you can get notified of our future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.